Our next esteemed speaker, Dr. Sthaneshwar Timalsina, as I belovedly called Acharyaji. We will now hear his insightful talk on the resurgence of Shakti, returning to the Divine Mother. Acharyaji, after earning his master's degree from Sampurnananda Sanskrit University, established the Department of Tantric Studies in Nepal and later pursued a Ph.D. at Martin Luther University, specializing in Advaita philosophy. He completed his Ph.D. in 2005 while also teaching at prominent universities. Acharyaji is an expert in Hindu studies and comparative philosophies, holding positions at San Diego State University since 2005. Acharyaji's deep-rooted knowledge is disseminated through the Vimarsha Foundation, a platform he founded in 2019, aiming to impart philosophical wisdom from various Hindu schools of thought. Presently, he holds the prestigious position of Endowed Chair of Indic Studies at Stony Brook University since 2023. Thank you so much for being with us today, Acharyaji. We're ready when you are. You can share your screen and we can get started. Thank you.
Is there anything to share? I'm in the. You can see me, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you don't have a PowerPoint to share, that's absolutely fine.
No. I have nothing. Nothing but just a few words. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me here. I gave this title Resurgence of Shakti, and I know this has a little bit of heat in it, like Kali energy. I am bringing this philosophy of Shakti and also its deep cultural expressions to the public platforms for a specific reason that we have ignored in the global scale an alternative perspective in the wake of what we call civilization. And that is the divine feminine. If you go to the early times and explore the indigenous cultures from any part of the world, you will find, number one, cultures were a mosaic of many different subcultures, and each of those were enriching with the presence of the divine feminine. And this centrality of the divine God as the Father has also a correlation with the formation of what we can call the modern nation states and established institutionalized religions, centrality of power, the kingship. And this has been continued with modern economic and political systems. And this has deep consequences. This has given us something good. This has also taken us something valuable from us. To explore some alternative ideas is not to reject the existing platforms or ideas. It is about growth. It's about growing with new ideas and new dimensions. So if we look back in the early agricultural societies, or before that in nomadic societies, there really is not that much of masculinity to define the central power that could not have been defined by the femininity. And you can see the early warfares, and the connections of the nation states, not controlled by the masculine force. And then it continues towards formation of the nation states, annexing new territories and new lands. So it has a philosophy of the ownership, of the control, that was not there before in this land as the feminine, the divine. You belong to her, not that she belongs to you. And in this, she belongs to you, new notions, we can see these consequences that we are facing today right in the wake of what is happening as we speak, whether we are talking about Russia and Ukraine, or whether we are talking about what is happening in the Middle East. So it's about control, expansion, and more control. If you dig deep into history, we will find that there are these correlates of capturing and controlling the land, with also the transcendence of the divine from earth. The divine becomes transcendent and not immanent, not tangible, but beyond our concepts or thoughts. Something that is not here, but up there. And that divine, bereft of physicality, corporeality, is the soul of the soul, the Godhead that controls the everyday activities of us, the humans. And we can find that the way it percolated down in the distribution of power among societies, that the power became more and more centralized and more toxic, more and more controlling. And then it also reflects in the modes of religiosity, being the transcendence of the self over the body. Our physicality became a suspicious thing. Religious practices became more and more severe to negate our body. And to punish the body became as if a course of exercising religiosity. The direct consequence of that was also about the subjugation of our feelings and emotions, because we immediately attested those to the feminine, the weak, the irrational side of our being, and we thought that our liberation is about repressing emotions and feelings. So we wanted to have this logos, the centrality of the thought of the words, to subjugate our body and our emotions and our feelings. So enlightenment, our liberation, became a cognitive process in which that Satori moment, aha moment, was not about an emotional engagement with the world, but rather a total separation from our corporeal feelings and thoughts and tangible divine. And then it continues, as you can see, it reflects in the way we think about nature, that we also thought that our obligation is to subjugate the earth, subjugate the nature, because in most cultures, land always remained the feminine, and the nature always is viewed as the feminine. And therefore, all our triumphs were the triumphs over everything we thought could be feminine. So it's not stressing too much or exaggeration if we say that many of the global consequences, whether we are reflecting upon our ecological crisis, whether we are reflecting upon our own acceptance of our embodied being and our emotional life, or whether it comes to reflecting our relationship with each other, not in a hierarchical structure bound by forces, but in a circular sense of coexistence, all the philosophies, all the ideas became this vertical structure of power, and our assumption about ourselves, even the way we think about our existence, remained the same way, vertically defined. We defined the goal of our life in the same vertical ladder of finding something that is transcendent. And as you can see, the way our hygienes, the way our food is now a subject of ephemeral, a momentary pleasure, meaning you do not want to spend too much time cooking and eating, go to fast food and be done with it. It's a tank. I need to fill my tank. My energy is low. A sense of mechanization of human existence, a sense of equating ourselves with robots as if, and a rejection of humanity beyond materiality, and materiality in the sense that there is nothing as you could consider soul, spirit, consciousness, or anything that lasts beyond this body. We are flesh and all that is there. So the whole circle, as a consequence, has come in negation of our being in the world. And this negation of our presence and being in the world has allowed us to accept some crazy ideas, our willingness to die for the cause that is imposed upon us by some beliefs, whether those beliefs are the political beliefs or religious beliefs. Because at the end, those ideas subjugate our actual, real presence, being in the world. Can we change some of these parameters for a new thinking, for a new global order? Because if the global order constructed on these parameters is not satisfactory for reflecting and representing the world that we live today, we need to explore a new platform that can address these new realities. So what is happening today is not just a ecological or corporeal emotional subjugations, but is sort of epistemicide in which our way of thinking has been cut through the middle and implanted onto us. And our education today has not been about revealing what we are from within, but preaching us to believe what we are ought to do. Because I, as an educator for so many years of my life, have questioned this again and again, the value of what I am teaching, that is this creating the subjects who are capable of reflecting their own true nature, or am I imposing some new ideas that the power that the nation state or the religious institutions like us to believe in, and so that we can be factory made, so that our actions are predictable, so that we can be grouped in particular structures and hierarchies and orders, and we can be given some commands so that the order that they like to maintain can continue. So if you start questioning these big problems, we have to look for an alternative perspective. And I believe that what is happening today, number one, also the rise of global education, the rise of the feminine, awakening of the feminine, both in the a real gender sense, but also in the divine or spiritual plane, in recognizing our own emotional being, recognizing the divine in her feminine forms. And so there has been a graphic change in the way people used to envision the absolute in the 20th century, in contrast to what is happening in the 21st century. So this is at commonplace today to talk about Kali, for example, no matter where you go to. It's not just about some masculine gods. It's okay to talk about Durga. It's okay to talk about Tripura Sundari, as I am doing actually in this current course for Vimarsha. Because even in the heartland of this divine feminine in India, Nepal, the times came where slowly this divine masculinity crept up and took over and then displaced in many regards the divine femininity. As a consequence, what happened? We rejected individuality of small cultures. We reject plurality and purchased the singularity of power. We accepted what a single state and the voice of the single state wants us to listen to. So the more disintegration of this central singular force continues to happen, the more decentralization of power happens, the more we get the peripheral forces to rise. And with the rise of these peripheral forces, we do have the chance for the resurgence of the divine feminine. And this is basically what I think, that the time has come, that we are seeing a dramatic shift in the way we envision power. What has happened? Because that Shakti, that is power, that is where I would like to speak for 2 more minutes, and I will not take too much of your time. This Shakti, our understanding of Shakti, has been in contrast to our understanding of freedom in our own self-expression, but freedom from. So today, if you have power, you speak for and yourself against something. Like there is somebody subjugating you, and you have to free yourself from those forces that are trying to control you. What if you have this power of freedom, of self-expression, of expressing yourself through arts and music and mathematics and science? It doesn't matter. That is also freedom. We have taken for granted as if that those freedoms don't matter. That is because we are living in a free society where self-expression in the forms of art or education are not subjected to power. But if you go to the places, the countries where you are not allowed to go to school, for example, or you are not allowed to study particular subjects, for example, whether it's because of your caste or gender orientation, and you can see the same level of subjugation based on the hierarchy, and rejection of this structure is the call of our time. And that transformation is possible only by us recognizing Shakti. That Shakti, the divine feminine, is the divine is yourself. And the feminine is the power that lies within you, that is expressed in terms of freedom. The freedom in your capacity to do something creative, the freedom of you to express yourself in what you can accomplish, the freedom to discover yourself. The ultimate discovery would be for the subject to recognize oneself mirroring through the totality. That we are calling pratyavijna, a self-recognition. When you have this recognition that you are the very self pulsating and vibrating in all the hearts in the globe, you express yourself, and everything expressing itself is your own presence in the myriads of forms, then there is no need for you to displace them. There is no need for you to prove yourself superior to them, because they are your own being and expression and extension. There is no need for you to prove that what you believe in the form of the God is somehow superior to what they believe as the expression of the divine. We will have this global shift of our perception if we are willing to go beyond this toxic masculinity and replace the divine femininity at the center and the periphery. This conception of power is very different in the sense that every expression in the pluralistic form is called Shakti. There is no singularity in the Shakti. If you are familiar with Tantra, you would know that any Shakti is worshipped in a mandala, and mandala is instantaneously an embracing of plurality. There is not a deity worshipped in a mandala in only one deity. It's impossible. Mandala itself invites plurality. And it goes further. For you to imagine a power at the center is not what constitutes the periphery. But when you have a circle, then the circle automatically determines the center. So this is the center that is constituted due to the establishment of the periphery. So this circle creates the bindu, the center, not that bindu is what is at the center already there and determining the periphery. We have to rethink power, and that rethinking of power should give us the ability to reflect upon our own epistemic systems, that the self that I have, the notion of the self I have, is not bereft of all these cognitive forces that flowing through me, through my sensations, sensory modes of my sight, my hearing, or my tactile sensation, or me tasting, smelling the world outside. And then when I recognize these very expressions are this me expressing into many forms, then the recognition of the self outside of our sensible, tangible being is left behind, and our very self becomes the expressions found in the form of the world. So therefore, you may not be looking for the ocean that is completely silenced of the tides, but you will be able to see the tides as the very forms or expression of the ocean. You will not be wondering, where is the forest? You go to the forest and you see a tree. This is an oak tree, that's a poplar, that's a dogwood. And then you ask, but where is the forest? Okay, the forest is just a collective name for all these trees. And then you will recognize that whatever we are calling God is merely the expression in the myriads of forms of these very Shaktis. And we find that in our different cognitive or motor capabilities, in our power of will, in our power of self-expression, in our power of cognition, and in our power of actualization, physically appropriating things in the world. So this transformation is happening from within and culturally also, because we live in this modern society, particularly where we have experienced freedom, to some extent freedom, that is automatically making us more pluralistic, more embracing, accepting our diversity. And that diversity itself is the gift of the divine feminine, because Shakti is always a Shakti Sanghatta, a communion, a coming together, banging together of multiple forces coming and colliding, but residing and creating a harmony about the class, about the and the harmony. All these are different modes of the very expression of Shakti. How can we transform our personal life by this altering the philosophical parameters in our personal life too? Our assumption that who I am is something completely outside of what I see, what I feel, what I touch. We should think about our modes of expression as an extension of our own being. When you see a turtle and then the turtle peeps out, rolls, like takes out little feet of the shell, and then, oh, the turtle is out there. The same way we think that myself coming out, my consciousness coming out of the body is somehow separated from my own physicality. But the turtle is its shell too. And what the turtle resides inside, it also is the body, but the shell is also its body. It's not something like a house only. You have to think that as a complete structure. The same way, our expression in the world is also what constitutes who we are. And therefore, our being, our presence, and ultimately our enjoyment in the world is also part and parcel of our very self-realization. Therefore, negating the world, rejecting everything that is given to us to enjoy, to feel our presence, is not something that is necessary for self-realization. That is just a self-deception. Self-deception is not self-realization. What is self-deception? To negate all that you experience in your life and hope that there is something beyond this, what you are given, that is self-deception. This self-realization, therefore, grounds our everyday experience, at the same time transforms everyday experience into this divine collective being, presence, play, and that is, you can call Chit Vilas, a play of consciousness in its expressed forms of plurality, and that you can call Shakti Chakra, the wheel of Shakti, the myriads of wheels of Shakti that we are negotiating the field with. And our presence in the world is that a negotiation of the field of ourselves. We are living among divines, and that living among divines is actualized by recognizing my own external presence and your external presence. When I negate my own external presence, I have no reason to conform your external presence. And what we do is we create a society that negates our real issues of being in the world. So being in the world should not be viewed as counterintuitive to our liberation. Being in the world should be viewed as integral to our self-realization, our liberation, or our recognition of fullness. Because this recognition of fullness could not be the recognition of me as my mind or what one particular idea that my mind allows when I am thinking of myself as the cogito, as the ego that I am. And therefore, there has to be something more than this reduced cogito, that reduced ego as the transcendent ego, to recognize myself in the totality. And that recognition of myself in the form of the totality comes in this gradual process of recognizing my own ego, recognizing my own emotional presence, and ultimately my physicality and my being in the world. Therefore, when I'm able to recognize my being in the world, then I would have no reason to negate your being in the world as if non-divine. So therefore, it would not even matter what you believe in or whether you don't believe in anything. Because if I were to be able to extend beyond my own subjective horizon, and embrace my corporeality as an extension of my being, and recognizing your own physicality as another expression of the same divine, I would have no issue to control your being in the world. And then this type of negotiated field in the world would be much more welcoming. And this type of negotiated philosophy, vision in the world would give us a changed perspective, and we would rethink to solve our ecological crisis, to solve our political crisis, and many of the toxic problems that we have created because of the controlling of the forces, negation of the divine feminine, and rejection of the beauty, the femininity in our spirituality, and using a masculine brutal force to impose our own personal vendetta as if given by God, citing even God, making ourselves as God's representative, and negating all other voices at the cost of our own voice, making ourselves next to the God, sitting next to the God. All these processes have a single consequence, that is to stop the blossoming of the humanity. And what would give us the full opportunity for our blossoming as the human to come to our fullness is this altered perspective that embraces and accepts diversity within ourselves. I am a plural being because my ways and modes of expression are plural, and that diversity within embraces diversity without, and that diversity within and without allows us to experience ourselves in the mandalike form, which is the divine presence in the feminine form. Call it Kali, Tripura Sundari, or any other name from any other culture. It does not matter. And so, coming to final words on Tantra, all these Shakti practices were prevalent in different tribes at one point. They were simply encoded from the tribal practices. And so this is a kept alive practices from various different tribal expressions of how they appropriated and accepted the divine presence in the world. So this is also a new assertion, acceptance of what had been marginalized. So therefore, to bring back the divine feminine is also to bring back what we had marginalized and repressed culturally. But it is not just about a cultural or political issue, it's also about the way we experience ourselves. It's a metaphysics. It's also a new epistemology because it embraces our own cognitive processes, parts and parcel of our own expression, rather than considering the self as a pure sheer transcendence, brings down to earth and makes it immanent. And it is in this changed perspective that we shall be able to recognize each other's divinity and each other's being in the world as integral to recognizing the self. I do not want to speak too much. Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you so much, Acharyaji. That was indeed a very powerful talk. Very powerful. Thank you so much. I would like to welcome maybe a couple of questions before we move on to the next session, if that's okay with you, Acharyaji. A couple of questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. So anyone in the audience with any burning questions that you would want to ask Acharyaji before we move on to our next session?
It doesn't look like anybody wants to ask anything. Hey, guys, come on.
Contemplating deep and thoughts after what we have said, after all the knowledge that you have imparted. It's only understandable that everyone is thinking and trying to internalize everything that you have bestowed upon us in knowledge today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Acharyaji. And again, to the audience, yes, like Anup mentioned, we're stunned. We're absolutely stunned. But to the audience, I would like to mention that if you have questions later on, if you think of something that you would want me to sort of send to Acharyaji, you're most welcome to do that. I will do that on your behalf, and I'll collect his answer and send it back to you. Thank you. Acharyaji, again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you.